Welcome to the 293 Code podcast. Today episode is trauma.
What about that trauma? Let's talk about it.
To it.
Trauma is one of those things that everybody faces. And what I mean by that is that if you think about it, right, it's like we all have dealt with some type of trauma in our life. Some big, some small. But how do you actually deal with it? Because I think sometimes people don't realize they have trauma events going on in their life and they try to just cover it under the rug and not deal with it. But then they don't realize that when you have trauma and you don't deal with it until you're ready to explode, what leads up to that trauma is your triggers.
That's true. Like sometimes people just push. Let me recorrect myself. I feel like people don't really know what their trauma is until they actually dig deep and figure out, oh, this is my trauma. Like, because I know some people, they be like, oh, I don't have trauma. I don't, that doesn't affect me. But then you don't realize how it affects you outside your relationships.
No, you're right, though. Because I think sometimes people think like, oh, well, I'm just being emotional. I'm expressing myself and this is how I am. It's like, no, technically, trauma and trigger comes with emotional behavior. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And your emotional behavior leads up to that trauma and your triggers leads up to the explosion.
Nah, you're right.
Because you use most of your energy to try to contain yourself and be like at a medium, at a middle, a middle point of your life to where you're like, you know what, I got it. I may get upset a little bit, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be able to work through, got to throw that mask on, and then I'm going to be good. And then you wonder why sometimes when people say, hey, why is it that when I have a situation where I'm expressing myself and you come out of pocket and people looking at you like you crazy or whatever, you have to look back down. You have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, maybe I could have handled that a different way. But like you said, if you haven't dealt with your trauma or recognized your triggers, how are you supposed to do that?
That's true.
And then what that leads to is the blame game. Well, I acted this way and I did this because this person made me feel some type of way, or this person's not listening to me, because
then you're triggered. It reminds you of your childhood.
Trigger have 3 emotional behaviors.
Okay.
Internal, external, and synthetic.
Explain that.
It's like, all the different categories, because you can walk around where internally you let it all build up. You don't say shit to nobody.
Okay.
You walk around, you be quiet, but you observant. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's like putting the water on the stove. That's the water on the stove. You just setting yourself. You see what I'm saying? That's the internal.
Okay.
The external is when you turn the stove on because you got to warm up that water. You start getting the bubbles. You see what I'm saying? So it's you bubbling up, bubbling it up. You see what I'm saying? The synthetic part is when you got the steam. You already done exploded. Now you really being who you are because it's synthetic, but nobody ever knew that part because you hid it under the rug.
Okay.
So with those 3 sets right there, you have to look at yourself and say, okay, how did I get to this point? Because like you said before, sometimes people don't recognize their own trauma. They keep it to that one event, but not realize maybe your triggers and your trauma started from years back.
Yeah, childhood.
You know what I'm saying? It's like a Lego set. You got to put the pieces together in order to build something.
Right.
But if you're trying to leave pieces out to make a figurine, how is it supposed to stand up? You're going to always walk around broken. And sometimes it's like we all have done it. I know, shit, I'm a pro at it. Walk around with triggers trying to hide it or whatever. But then, you go to your comfort zone, that safe place, to where you like, okay, now behind closed doors, you let it, I can let myself feel free. That anger comes out. You either self-harming or you punching the wall, you crying, you screaming, you doing all this stuff. But you realize when you go back outside that door the next morning, you got to be somebody that you're not, because you already done presented to the world, hey, I don't have any trauma. I'm just a natural human being. I know I'm not perfect. But nobody's actually seeing the real you because you don't know whether or not people are going to accept that. Because sometimes people already don't put a picture in their head who they think you really are.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you try to be that person that you want to portray yourself to be this nice person, not knowing that you're struggling with yourself and who you are.
Now you're right. Because you know what? Trauma is a part of who you are. But then you got to ask yourself, when are you ready to accept it?
Yeah. I feel like when people when we have trauma, I can give myself an example. I have childhood trauma, right? And how I dealt with that trauma growing up was, first of all, I was very quiet, shy, I had anxiety, disassociate, you know what I'm saying? And then I used sports to leverage that just to cover up that mask where I don't have to deal with my trauma. You know what I'm saying? I don't have to think about it. And as a child, you don't really know what's going on emotionally with your body or, how to take about it, especially black folks and black kids. We're not really taught on emotions and, how important that is to your mental.
That's true.
And so for me, I did sports, all three sports, if anybody knows me. I did track, basketball, soccer. I did martial arts, kickboxing, you name it, I did it. And it was just, I didn't realize at that time what I was running from, or I didn't realize my trauma until it came out in the court. Like I started beating motherfuckers up and I didn't know why I was angry, but I was also being triggered at home as well. So it just comes out and we don't understand it, especially children.
Right. But have you ever felt like sometimes people be like, oh, you just need a good cry and get it out? What is crying going to help if you're not talking about what you're really experiencing?
Crying lets out all that energy. I can say, I was never a crier until one day I cried like a baby, snot nose, everything. And for that moment, it's just a moment. It's not going to carry you on for the rest of your life. It's a moment. And that's when you recognize like, there's something really wrong with me in the sense of, I don't know how to verbally communicate my emotions that I have inside me.
I think the hardest part is like what you just said, like when you finally realize like, hey, something is wrong with me, it's almost like a letdown. You put more pressure on yourself. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I say that is because you already painted this picture for everybody to see you one way.
Yeah.
And then when you have to turn around and say, hey, this is really the true me, but people can't adapt to who you are authentically.
Right.
That's trauma within itself.
That's so true.
Because then you, in your mind, you're dealing with the abandonment of losing, family members, friends, people who really say they cared about you.
And people that look up to you.
Yeah, but when people are uncomfortable to really accept who you are, they fall off because they don't know if they can be around it. Mm-hmm. Because you know what? 9 times out of 10, they haven't dealt with their own trauma. And so what they see you do, and it comes to the light, what happens is they're like, well, shit, I'm about to run away because I got my own shit to worry about. I can't deal with your shit. So don't nobody ever want to sit down at the table and talk about like, hey, how's your mental health today? Mm-hmm. But I want you to be real. Mm-hmm. People don't do that anymore. People sugarcoat shit.
No, they definitely do sugarcoat shit.
You know what I'm saying? And it's sad that, you have to wait till you get into adulthood and go through so much stuff in life to realize like, hey, I've been traumatized. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm ready to talk about it. But people don't realize when you're ready to talk about it, it's like starting with chapter 1.
No,
you really got to
right.
be real with yourself. You got to really break it down and you got to stop the blame. And what I mean by stop the blame is that not saying that you are held accountable for your trauma. Mm-hmm. What I mean by stopping the blame is like, you know what? I'm no longer going to live my life blaming other people for the trauma that I have received.
No, you're right.
I'm going to move forward. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get through it. But every day it's a different day. And your trauma is always going to have you have those major setbacks. Mm-hmm. But you got to continue to ride that ride and eventually have enough power to get over that first speed bump.
But here's my question. Like, I think my problem was like, how do I get over that speed bump? I didn't know how to get over that speed bump. I was like, with everything going on, like my trauma, childhood trauma, like it started to mask into anger. And, I would like literally, I can like kick somebody's ass.
Right.
Like, but I didn't know how to, like I said, verbally express that, or, you know, because we, back in the day, taboo, it was a taboo to express
It was.
those type of feelings, you know.
Right.
Either you were like, man, I'm just angry, I'm finna go buck wild. That was acceptable. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Or it's just like, oh, I'm having a good day. Now, everybody likes a happy person,
Exactly.
because that happy person don't make you, that doesn't trigger you, you know, on, oh, like this person like really has issues. This person trigger me.
Right.
And so it really, like, you never know how to navigate that. So for me, I didn't know how to navigate that until later on in my life.
Well, I mean, from my own personal experience, I didn't know how to navigate it either. Because growing up, I was timid. I was shy. And I didn't like people touching me. Hell, half the time I didn't even like people talking to me, because I felt like, oh, it's a waste of energy. You know what I'm saying? Because I knew that, like, the only way I knew how to deal with my trauma was avoidance. If I could see somebody that I didn't want to talk to, or if I felt like, you know, one of my 3 senses would come up, because I would get like sensory overload, anxiety would rise up, you know, get exhausted, the fear set in. I would literally, if I had only 5 steps to get to my destination and somebody was blocking that way, I would take an extra 100 steps just to go around, just for avoiding.
Oh, shit. Okay.
I thought for the longest, hey, as long as I avoid situations, then my triggers won't affect me. That's happiness, right?
Yeah.
I was dead wrong. It wasn't until I started going to therapy that I realized what the problem was. The problem was the avoidance. And I had programmed myself so well to where I could go to therapy, sit in that chair, and I could tell my therapist, this right here, what happened, this is how I feel, that happened. But I never let myself feel what I was saying. I was robotic.
So
because I knew what had happened while I was there. But I didn't let myself feel. And that's one thing that you have to do when you start trying to work on your trauma, is you have to feel it.
Right.
You know? And when you do start feeling it, you have more speed bumps set up, because the simple fact is, once you feel like your body's starting to ball up like that hot water, then you close everything off. I was just like you. I used to disassociate so much. I still do it now, but not as bad. That I could be in a room, I could be looking at you, you could be having a full-blown conversation. And I'm literally robotic, where I'm shaking my head and I'm talking to you. And it's like, oh, yeah, everything. Oh, okay, that's good. And I will remember key words, but I couldn't remember everything you were saying to keep that conversation going. But I couldn't tell you from point A to point Z what we was talking about.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? And that's sad.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you disassociate that deep, you could be around people who are literally telling you their whole life story. It can be emotional or whatever. And I'll just be sitting there, it's like stone cold. Like, oh, well, why everybody crying? I done missed the whole damn conversation.
Damn.
Because I would make sure that I wouldn't get attached to whatever you were saying.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? That's trauma.
Yeah.
But for me, and how I looked at stuff, I was always in survivor mode. That's how I got by. Through school, everything. Only let certain things click. And then, you know, you just figure out the rest. You just kind of just scoot along. And a lot of trauma survivors do that. And people don't realize it. Because you get good at it.
Yeah, I used to daydream a lot.
Yep.
Like, I would, like, if I'm, like, in a situation, I would literally daydream of a better situation. And I used to do that as a child a lot.
I was, you know, I did too. I would have a whole new family. I'm talking about, like, I would be the only kid. I had, you know, my family was rich, you know, rich grandparents. I was spoiled. You know what I'm saying? I had a whole lifestyle. But then, like, what some people, okay, this is going to sound a little off the wall, but I mean, like, if you dealt with a lot of deep trauma to where, like, you fantasize about that so much that you make up your own family in your head. That you have imaginary friends, you got imaginary parents, grandparents. You done built a whole new family in your head that you start thinking that shit is real.
You know, you're right. I built a whole new father.
Yeah.
Until, you come face to face with the real one, and it's just like
it don't match up.
It don't match up, but it's disappointing though. You end up disappointing yourself,
right?
Because it's like I wanted my father to be this way, be present,
right?
All of my life and be this great dad, and whatever that may be. Back then, I didn't even know what a great dad was, but I knew, like, I saw my friends and they dad show up, and did some things with them, and show up to schools, do like activities, science project, and then, you meet yours and you're like, oh, this is disappointing.
It is disappointing because you know what? Like me and my dad, we really, when he was present, I mean, we didn't have a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like, it was almost like we were strangers. I would communicate to my mom to get through my dad. You know what I'm saying? Because like when he was around, it was one of those things where it was just kind of like we didn't have that bond.
But did you daydream of a better dad though?
Oh yeah, all the time. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And it was just like, especially with basketball, it's like, being a tomboy, and it's like, what dad wouldn't want like their child to be like in the sports? Like I was into everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it was just like, to not have him there at the game, to not be interested in what I was doing and all that stuff, like it hurt. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Because the hardest thing that you have to deal with in life is when you're a child is trying to get acceptance from your parent.
Oh yeah. Because when you come out, they're probably they're the first person you see. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because over time, it doesn't matter about getting recognition from other people that you don't know. Because you get that all the time.
Right.
But the one person that you want to get it from, you never do. It's just kind of like, man. And if they do say something to you, it don't even seem real anymore because you fantasize it for so long. That's what you really want. Mm-hmm. And when you get that one time, oh, good job, it don't even matter anymore. Still kind of a disappointment.
Yeah, no. I've gotten better. Like, since I've been in therapy, I've been like working on that piece of healing. And then I just look at it like this, like, when my parents, they were from a different era, and then look at the trauma and, because my dad's parents died when he was an early age.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, I think he was maybe 7 or something. But you look at that, and I don't think he even realized that he has trauma from that. And then trauma of living in the South and, dealing with a lot of the discrimination and racism back then was at its all-time high for my dad.
I think, well, you hit the nail on the head. It's just like in general, people don't have to agree with what I'm about to say, but I mean, I was born and raised in the South all my life. Mm-hmm. And it's just like living in the South, they have, it's like their own little world where it's like, stuff that happened back in the 1940s and 1930s still going on now today. Like one of the big things is racism and discrimination. And the thing of it is that when you brought up around that type of trauma, that's trauma within itself.
Yeah.
And you never leave that part of the bubble to explore what it's really like if you move to another state. It's sad. It's really sad.
Because your perspective is that.
Yeah. Because if you grow up around racism and you think, well, man, all people is like this, and you actually go somewhere where it's not, it's a culture shock, first of all. And then second of all, it's a trust issue. Because you don't even give a person an opportunity, no matter how they look or how they dress. There's always going to be a prejudgment on an individual that you don't even know about just because of how they look.
Right. But I think you have to be present. Like, prime example. I did that smack. A prime example is Merida. I'm Mexico.
Yeah. Because, I tell it. It's Merida.
Yeah, Merida. Yeah. Mexico. And we were just there last week.
Yep.
So forgive us if this podcast roll out a little late today. But we were just there last week, and I actually, for the first time, was present because I couldn't understand, like, they would come up to us and speak fluent, like if we knew
what they
like,
were saying.
What they were saying, like we should know. And then I didn't realize the way they look at us is totally different than America look at us.
Yeah.
So they look at us as one human being.
They do.
Know, either you speak Spanish or you don't.
Right.
They don't really like see color. And so it was interesting to see the dynamic with that, even though, the Spaniards conquered, not conquered, but came in and pretty much, enslaved their people and took over. And so it was just interesting. And plus they had a black Jesus. So that was interesting. But just looking at, how did they do with their trauma? And that's
right.
That's a good question.
But I think being in Mexico, it was really a good experience just because, when we went last year, we didn't really get to see a lot of like their culture and how everybody moved and stuff like that. But this year, being more in the inland and getting to experience like how people move in Merida, it was, a good life experience because, coming back to the States, you realize like the misfortunes that, they don't have compared to what we got up here and how people take advantage of what we do have. Like for prime example, down there, it's like when you use the bathroom in public, when you go to events, you have to pay to use the bathroom. Like they don't have the same water system we have in America. We was in an Airbnb and like it tells you on the thing because of their water system, you're not allowed to put any type of paper products in the toilet. You had to literally roll it up. Whether you did a number 2 or a number 1, regardless, you had to put it in the trash can because of their water system. So it's like, it's very humbling to be able to realize like, hey, we don't think about stuff like that.
We don't.
And it's very humbling because they're so in tune with their history and like the places that we went and explored. And it was like the people was nice. And it's like, man, only if we can get ourselves together in America, but everybody want to be right here. That's the thing. In America, everybody want to be right. Everybody want to prove a point. Down there, they just living to survive and they enjoy what they have. Nobody trying to outdo each other.
Right.
You go outside and you see everybody embracing, they speak, I mean, I understand half of it, but you know what I'm saying? I still would nod my head and I would be respectful because it felt good to be able to be somewhere where you felt safe and you didn't have to worry about looking over your back. You didn't have to worry about nobody being racist or discriminative, any of that. You know what I'm saying? And it's like everybody down there are hardworking individuals, even little kids. It's all about making that $1, but at the same time, it was unity. And that's one thing that we don't have here in America.
It definitely was unity. I think in America, like Merida, how you say it? Merida. There you go.
Okay, there we go.
It reminds me of Germany. And the reason why I say that is because they tell you the good and the bad of their history, right? They don't sugarcoat it. They tell you this what happened, blah, blah, blah. They're very open about their culture. They're very open about their history. I think with us in America, we are not. And so we're constantly triggered and traumatized and repeated. And so if you have something that keeps repeating, it's going to traumatize a person, especially if it's bad. Like, prime example, being in a place like Mississippi, prime example.
Alabama.
Like
what just happened with the whole the showboat thing.
The showboat.
Prime example.
That's a prime example. And it's traumatizing.
It is traumatizing. Whether you was there or not, it's still traumatizing because just like the footage that everybody was putting on social media, you know what I'm saying? Race is such a big issue here and it comes down to politics. All this stuff is what's mattering. I'm up here making up words that matter in America. When you go to these other countries, that stuff don't matter. Like they tell you their history, no matter how bad it is, but they embrace what their people did in their time. Here, our history is so broken down and it's not told correctly because we got to let certain people look at a higher standard. Like it's supposed to be like, oh, they did this, they did that. History here is not being told the way it's supposed to be told, and we don't embrace it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes all these issues. And like you said, depending on what color you are, depending on if you male or female, depending on like just your culture alone here in America, it comes behind a lot of trauma.
Yeah, it's trauma, and it's like a series of roller coasters in
Right.
America. And I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, but I'm just being honest and clear. It's like a series of roller coasters where your trauma trigger, trauma trigger, trauma trigger. So it keeps repeating itself.
Right.
And you're in this perpetual cycle that you can't get out of because nobody wants to have conversations, nor like everybody wants to say, well, no, that wasn't me, or, get over it. When you tell a person with trauma to get over it, that
That's
triggers them even
That's
worse. Saying it triggers even worse. So to even say, well, that was a long time ago and sweep it under the rug.
Yep.
Like you just like
opened up a can of worms
and said how I'm feeling is not important. That's a trigger.
Right.
And it's just like a relationship, you get in a relationship and you've been in a relationship for a long time and you guys have this blowout and all of a sudden you say, you know what? You're just overreacting. It's not that serious. Right. So that means the communication is already broke down because you didn't come and say, you know what, let's have a conversation. I see that, this is kind of triggering you. What is it that's triggering you?
Right.
Other than that, at the end of the day, you're like, oh, just get over it. That's a trigger. People don't know their words can be trigger for people. Their actions can be triggered for people.
Exactly.
A music can be triggered a sound can be triggered to people, a smell, because you never know what that person has gone through.
You're right. And to go back to the whole, what you were just saying earlier, I want to bring it back to the riverboat.
Yeah,
thing.
the Alabama.
Because in Alabama is because it's so disappointing. And people been talking about it, for weeks since it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing of it is that I see like on TikTok or whatever, how people trying to defend and, some people are like, well, did you see that guy hit the woman with the chair? Hey, well, all I'm going to say is, violence is not okay in any aspect of life. Violence is not, but that situation that happened, you have people that are good Samaritans was like, hey, they being ganged up on. And you look at the whole entire principle and it's sad to say like, this is the new America. Mm-hmm. It was just swept under the rug with people being racist and discriminated against for no reason because the individual out there doing their job. Mm-hmm. And then once again, hear everybody picking sides. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? But it's like this. Yeah, violence is wrong. But sometimes people got to get those hands. I'm just saying. Sometimes you got to get those hands because enough is enough, And it's just like this, if an employee tell you like, hey, you guys are blocking the way because the ferry got to come in, which is a work site, and you don't want to move and you get mad and you blow up on the individual because
you want to be entitled
and everything. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody got what they deserve. Period, point blank, at the end of the day. And it ain't about choosing sides, it's about what's right or wrong. But at the end of the day, when you look at it, this is America history repeating itself all over again. But people ain't just standing still now.
Yeah, I think people are more than ever, they like, oh, it was wrong to hit that lady with the chair. Well, shit, it was wrong to hang us. It was wrong to sick your dogs on us when we was just walking to the store. It's wrong to take, people's families away from them. So you don't see nothing wrong with that. And I'm going to be honest with you. Like, she was jumping. She knew what she was doing. She was jumping to get some.
Like they tell you, if you know the stove on and you put your hand on the oven and you get burnt, that's your fault.
You finna learn today.
Now you got people out here getting chair tattoos. Now it's trending on TikTok. If you go on TikTok, everybody getting a chair tattoo. One person put it on the inside of their elbow, so you close it. I mean, like people making a mockery of it now with the whole chair thing. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, hey, yeah, A man shouldn't hit a woman shouldn't hit a man. Nobody should put hands on each other at the end of the day. All I'm saying is, if you approach that situation knowing good well you in the wrong, then you got what you deserve.
Yeah. And people got to realize you can only do, that's just like an animal being caged, right?
Right.
You mistreat them, keep mistreating them for years, right? And you keep doing it. What do you think's going to happen?
They gonna bite your ass.
They're going to bite you. They're going to have you for dinner. So you keep poking the bear, and then, you think you're right. You're pushing, we're already, like, minorities are already pushed to the limit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Especially in America, we're pushed to the limit. And here's another thing. With trauma, you're going to have fight, flight, what's the other one? Freeze. There's the last.
I can't remember what the other one is.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about. I just can't remember what it is.
So now back then we had a freeze. That means you disassociate, keep walking. That was in the MLK days. Now, things are changing where now people are fighting. They're in that fight mode. Because we've been there. We've been traumatized for so long. Traumatized is fear. Fear, I'm fearing that my son or whoever grow up might get killed for nothing.
For nothing. And the thing of it is, and it's like this. This is America. And they wonder why now mental health is such a huge problem. But the thing of it is that mental health has always been a problem.
It has.
It's just that back in the day, it never got addressed. It got swept under the rug.
They put you in what? They put you in the asylum?
You was in an asylum, yeah.
Yeah.
You get locked up and throw away the key.
Mm-hmm.
But mental health has been around. It ain't, sometimes I get angry because people try to act like mental health is like a new age thing. Mental health has always been around. Mm-hmm. But it was because of generational changes that now mental health is becoming to be one of those things where no, this need to be taken care of. Because you think about it, just a couple of years ago, when we start having all these shootings, now it's starting becoming a yearly event. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then people saying, oh, mental health. You can't just put mental health out here as a stigma and not get to the root of the cause. Before that person did what they did, right? You got to go back and look at the one key thing. What was their trauma?
Oh, yeah.
See what I'm saying? It goes always back to the trauma. What triggered them? What made people, the thing you got to ask people, what make you do what you do?
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
With accountability, right?
Yeah.
What make you do what you do? And then, but some people get that confused with blame. Well, I did this because such and such. No, it's deeper than that. You got to get to the root of the cause. When you just automatically put the blame out there, you're not holding yourself accountable for anything.
I'm going to tell you right now, watching the Alabama thing, it said trauma to me.
Yeah.
Like, I can't guarantee you what I would have done if I was there.
The only good thing that came out of that whole situation
is unity.
Is nobody got killed. There was no gunfire.
Yeah, that too.
Because, being in Alabama, people carry. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? That's the first thing some people go to now is like, let me pull out my gun and just shoot up everybody. Because there was a lot of people out there. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, people got injured. But you know what? Wounds heal over time. I'm just thankful nobody got killed. Because it's just like, there is so much pain and trauma that goes on with individuals. So everybody that jumped out into the water, jumped on that platform, people got triggered from that event. And they was like, you know what? Today is going to stop. Enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
You know what I'm saying?
Enough is enough. And we carry our ancestors' trauma.
Yeah. And it's like every race have a trauma. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You look at the Jews, you look at the Mexicans, you look at the Latinos, you know what I'm saying? Every country have its own type of trauma, and people have their own individual trauma, family-based wise. Mm-hmm. But we have to be more kind to each other. Not nice, because nice get you stuck. But we have to be more kind to each other to really get to know a person for who they really are. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes I think people are so scared to be who they really are because of judgment. When you have mental health issues, what are you being? You being judged. When you get triggered, what happened? You being judged.
Being judged, you're right.
But sometimes I think the reason why people judge is because if you're not doing anything about your own trauma, then people are going to judge you.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just something, to give people to think about, real talk, because sometimes mental health get put into that stigma, and it's not fair, because it's like some of us out here are actually putting in the work every day, and it's hard.
No, you're right.
And when you putting in that work, you ain't looking for kudos. Your kudos to you as an individual is like, you know what? I made it another day.
No, you're right.
That's your gold star. When you really working on yourself, you're not looking for validation from anybody except for yourself, because that's where your true work starts, is looking for validation from yourself and not from other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is definitely so many traumas, that we all deal with. We just talked about racial aggression trauma, which was the Alabama, and which goes on in America every day. A loss of a job can be a trauma, right?
Yeah.
Community violence is a trauma, and Black people, we suffer a lot with that, seeing a loved one dead in the street or being killed, that's a trauma.
Right.
A near-death experience, a medical trauma. I mean, there's so many traumas. Pregnancy loss, trauma. Infidelity is a trauma, because you're always going to think, is this person going to cheat on me? Even when you go to the next relationship, you're always going to have that, right?
Yep.
So that's a trauma. So there's so many traumas. It's not just
abuse.
Abuse. It's just not abuse. It's emotional, physical, psychological trauma that we go to, that we have, that a lot of us try to act like that's our normal shield.
Right.
And yeah, trauma, as a child, it creates who we are as an adult, but you start seeing some things where relationships don't work.
But what also bringing the trauma too is when you get to adulthood and you never really face your trauma as a child, going into your teenage years and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It brings on more trauma as an adult when you realize you have been traumatized, and what it was really about when you get to the root of the cause. It's sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you realize man, I missed out on a lot in life, and now I can't get it back. And when you get to a point where you old and can barely move or whatever, only thing you could do now is just fantasize on how your life could have been if you worked on yourself at a younger age.
Now you're right.
And sometimes for some people, you don't get that luxury to be able to, confront your family and say, hey, I got mental health problems. And if your family is not open-minded, and they just tell you you get through it because I got through it, when they really didn't get through it, and you forced to have to be that type of way, you really becoming somebody that you're not, but you so caged in and you so trapped within yourself, you don't know how else to be. So you walk around, like you said, angry all the time.
Yeah.
And upset and mad, and just realize fuck, life is over with now.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
All because of trauma.
The thing is, if we don't deal with our trauma, it would never heal. So if you're thinking, well, if I just don't deal with my trauma, then, it don't exist.
Right.
No, it do exist. You just don't realize that it's coming out. It's affecting your relationship with your child, with your children, relationship with your mother, relationship with your father, your relationship with your husband, boyfriend, whoever, work. It's going to affect you in a way that you don't think about.
Yeah, because trauma brings on nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I said before, stress, anxiety, fear, sensory overload, frustration, fatigue. It brings it all on.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't realize that. And, grief also brings trauma.
Yes. Yes.
That was a hard one that I had to learn for the longest.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that having to deal with the trauma first in order to understand the grief. Because it's totally two different things.
Yeah.
When you see something you're not supposed to see or something unexpected, it brings on all these other emotions. And the first thing to protect yourself in your internal self is to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first thing you want to do, you want to get angry. You don't want to cry.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
If you feel like you can't be sad, you just stay stubborn and just stuck, and you just turn your heart cold.
Yeah.
Some people don't realize that they're doing it. They're thinking oh, I'm getting by. And it's like, getting by for who? For what? Because it's all about, you having to let everybody know that you're strong. And, that's a lot of words that people use too when somebody be traumatized. Hey, you hang in there. You're strong. What the hell do that even mean?
What if I don't want to be strong, though?
Right. But you know what? You got to have the right people around you in order for you to cope with things. Because like you said, what if you don't want to be strong? Then you got to find an individual that you don't want to be strong with that will accept you for who you are and let you lean on their shoulder. But some people ain't willing to do that because you know what? They don't have time.
They don't have time. They always like, I can't, and I'm saying being like family history would teach you like, oh, I was standing on my own. I can do this on my own. I got this. I don't need nobody. Yeah. That's trauma words. That's trauma. You're expressing trauma when you say that.
But see, some families try to make it seem like it's cool. Have you noticed that? Oh, nah, they doing good. They done been through a lot though. And it's just like, who they supposed to be impressing?
Yeah. I mean, shit, you can go through a lot. You can be successful, but that trauma's still there, regardless of where you go. You know what I'm saying? You can have all the money in the world in your pocket. It can take one thing that triggers you that can send you back to that childhood trauma or that trauma experience that you had. And then you realize, well, shit, I'm actually having the trauma. I shouldn't have this trauma. And these are the talks. I shouldn't have these traumas because I got all this money. How do I deal with it? Oh, I guess I'll take a trip and jump off the nearest building skydiving. Or, I'll do all this stuff so I don't have to cope with it. Or I buy all these things so I don't have to think about it. It's going to make me temporarily feel good. And I said it temporarily because that's all it is. It's temporary feelings. It don't last long.
Nah, you absolutely right about that. We all been through that. Just like when people go through midlife crisis or whatever. When you getting old, you just got to embrace it. Nobody said you couldn't stop having fun, but you still got to embrace the fact like, hell, you getting old.
Getting old, yeah.
And you got to just figure out different ways to maneuver. But some people, they struggle with that.
Yeah.
Because you know what? That's what got them by to make them feel good about themselves. But mentally, deep down, it's a change.
Yeah, you're right.
When Arthur come knocking and sit there and get into them kneecaps, Arthur ain't going nowhere.
Cousin Arthur, my grandma.
Just like, and like tendonitis, that's little Timmy. When little Timmy coming to visit, he ain't going, they coming to stay.
Yeah.
They coming to move in. So it's just like, you're going to have to move differently. You may be a little bit slower, but mentally, some people have a hard time with that, especially athletes.
With what?
When your body start going through changes, and like I said, when arthritis set in,
that's a trauma within itself.
When you start to realize like, hey, I can't do what I used to do. I can't move as fast.
Yeah.
Like those type of changes, some people can't handle because that's what they use. Those moments, you use your body to be your scapegoat.
I know I did.
And that's why
it was devastating
a lot of athletes
for me.
are realizing that like, hey, I got to treat my body like a temple so that I can still move when I'm 70 and 80 years old, but
very smart.
Unfortunately, when you have injuries and stuff
but that's like self-aware though.
It is self-aware, but at the same time, if you use your body to escape from your trauma, it catches up with you. Then what?
Trust me, it does.
It catches up with you.
Let me tell you, I went to jump for a ball. I thought I blocked it. But when I came down, I bent up like a pretzel. Now, anybody know me? I was very athletic. Tone, great shape, good knees, good ankles. I can't say the same now.
Well, see, I just converted over to like, you know what? I can't move like how I used to move. Because I was very active. I was BMX biking, I was skateboarding, longboarding, and I did my regular sports. But it came down to like, oh man, I can't really do what I used to do. So I just converted it over to video gaming. You have to, like I say, you have to find a different way to maneuver.
You do. So here's signs that your trauma is unhealed. Because I think, and then we're going to talk about those things. When you expect your partner to be your everything, Let's get into that one.
Ooh. When people do that, and it happens a lot, especially in relationships, it's because they want you to give them what they can't give themselves. And that's the biggest mistake you can ever make. If a person come into a relationship and they're insecure about themselves and they want you to be like, this is what I want and need from you at all costs to make stuff work, you got to reevaluate every little thing. You know what I'm saying? You have to.
Right.
That's the only way that's going to work. But I think sometimes people don't understand that. You know, they just sit here and think like, no, this is what I want, this is what I need. But in all aspects, that's kind of selfish.
Right.
Because if you can't give it to yourself, then how you expect for somebody else to give it to you? Especially if you with somebody else who don't even know how to even give it or receive it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, that is so true. That is so.
And that's when people get into relationships where it's trauma bonding.
Yeah.
Just got to say it. Trauma bonding. I'm just saying.
Yeah, trauma bonding. You want to explain that trauma bonding? Because some people don't understand.
Well, the thing of it is with trauma bonding is where, you know, you may have your own trauma. That person may have their own trauma. And then you get to know each other and you discussing each other's trauma. And you thinking like, oh man, because we got the same traumas and we got stuff going on that's similar. We're made for each other. This is what's going to carry us through. And you thinking that you getting that healthy support from each other when you really not, because you still don't know each other individually. Only thing you just shared was something was you had in common, but you base that trauma off that and think that, oh, this is what's brought us together. Now, when it comes to trauma bonding, you got to ask yourself, let's make this make sense.
You right on that one.
When you're dealing with a lot of trauma, you got to have a partner in your life that's going to be there to support you and tell you what you don't want to hear, but push you in other aspects to get stuff started. But at the same time, you don't want to go into the codependency part of it either. You can't expect for somebody to do the work for you. No, they can only tell you what you need to do. You got to be the one to decide that you want to do it, because of the simple fact, if you don't do it for yourself, then what's the point? Because, you know, a lot of times when you haven't worked on yourself individually and people are like fixers, the first thing that we say, because I've done it plenty of times, is that I did this for you. I did it to make that person happy. If they're happy, I'm happy. No, that's not how the way you go about it, guys. Trust and believe.
Yeah, it don't work that way.
For failure every single time.
Yeah, it don't work that way. No, you absolutely right.
I think for me, it took, you know, so many disappointments and so many letdowns and, you know, trying to make stuff work with different people for me to realize like, hey, I got to work on myself first. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, me too as well. So that's something to think about when you're getting into a relationship. And, you know, is that person your everything? That's a question to ask yourself. Second one is difficult trusting and being vulnerable in a relationship.
Hell yeah. Because it's like this. If you have trust issues and you know at the same time that you want to believe in somebody, but you have vulnerable moments, it's like, don't get in a relationship. Yep. Don't do it. Don't get married. Be by yourself until you realize the difference. And I'm not saying that you have to be able to trust everybody, because we all have trust issues. You can't sit here and say, I don't have trust issues. No, everybody got trust issues. Let's just be real.
No, you're absolutely right.
But if you don't know yourself and you have trust issues with everybody, then you putting that wall up because you think everything that come out of somebody's mouth, like, oh, they're trying to get me off guard. They're trying to make me, you know, gullible and become vulnerable to situations. So if you struggle with those two together, like I said again, y'all, you got to make it make sense.
You got to make it make sense. I mean, you have to be, in order to have a healthy relationship, honestly, you have to be vulnerable in those moments.
You have to be vulnerable, but you got to be vulnerable in a healthy way, though.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
you got to be. Because it's like, if you don't trust the person that you with, but you just go along and you sit up here like trying to track their every move and their actions and stuff, you're not trusting them if you got to do all that. If you start over with a clean slate, it got to be a clean slate. Just like if you get out of one relationship and you jump into another relationship, you got to start that relationship older. You can't bring what that last person did into a new relationship and then start comparing what they did and say, well, see, I knew this was going to happen. You acting just like such and such. Hey, you never gave it a clean slate because you still holding on to your past.
You're absolutely right. You're so true about that. Okay, so here's another one. Trying to self-medicate through alcohol and other drugs.
And that is a bit negative. What people don't realize about that is just that, you know what, everybody have a different chemical imbalance. The thing of it is about being self-aware is that you cannot put down your emotional effects when you're going through trauma, when you're going through mental episodes. You have to be able to deal with it head on. People don't realize they have the new stuff with microdosing. If you're not doing it in a clinic, don't sit here and think you're a doctor that you can do it on yourself.
You're absolutely right. I see people do that.
Right, because when you microdose wrong or you out here smoking weed and doing all this other stuff, you don't realize that all you causing for yourself is a bigger entity that you cannot handle. You know, the first thing that you're going to set up is mood swings, anxiety, fear, frustration, fatigue. And you got to sit here and say, your body's going to start craving it more. Oh, I just got to pop another one. That's not how it works. You haven't dealt with anything. All you're doing is compressing it down. That's it.
That's it. You're being like a pot on the stove.
Yeah, because you know what? If you think about it, you know what I'm saying? And people who try to self-medicate, they think, well, oh, I done found the solution. No, all you're doing is not wanting to talk about your issues, and you adding more issues onto your plate that you can't even handle because you don't want to talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, when you know, like, people have the big stigma. I don't want to take medication. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Some people need medication.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no judgment. I mean, hell, I'm on a lot of medication. You know what I'm saying? And it goes through the up and down, trying to figure out what fits, you know. And the norm most people go through every 3 months of getting their medication reevaluated or whatever. Mine's getting reevaluated every month. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody's situation is different. But the thing of it is that, like, you really have to give medicine to a certain point a chance, you know, between that 4 to 8 weeks. But sometimes medication help to get you balanced, and you can wing off of it eventually. You don't have to be on it forever. People get the wrong stigma about medication because they see people who mishandle it, and boom, that's the stigma come out.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on that one. Okay, and then the other one is, this is going to be a good one. Engaging in self-harm or self-destruction behavior.
That is a good one. Because when you haven't dealt with what's going on, or if your trigger get activated, you be ready to explode. I mean, me personally, I used to self-harm, but the thing about self-harming, it was, okay, I wasn't a cutter. I was more of like abusive to myself. It was more of like, you know what, pounding the chest, you know, hitting myself in the face, you know what I'm saying, punching the wall. It was more self-destruction. You know what I'm saying? Because that was easier to explain. Oh, man. Yeah, I just got a bruise. I don't know how I got a bruise. Or I shut the door. Or I fell down. You know what I'm saying? Or playing football, playing a sport. It was easy to, you know, describe. But then when you got a whole list of, like, from the ER of, like, bruised ribs and stuff like that, you know, it's kind of like, okay, this shit is starting to add up. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, now I got to have more self-control. But I think of it is that some people feel like, oh, well, pain makes me feel better. But pain also brings on where you are disciplining yourself in a way that you shouldn't discipline yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, you punishing yourself for something that may have happened to you, but instead of talking about it, you'd rather cover that up and beat yourself down.
Yeah.
You know, it took me about, I would say, almost 4 years to realize, like, hey, you know what? I got to find a different way. And I was already in therapy, you know what I'm saying? But when you start talking about your traumas, you start going back to your old habits, because trauma, when you talk about your trauma, your triggers get activated and like, okay, let's go. We about to start this rodeo again. You know what I'm saying? But it took a while to really, like, break down every individual trauma about what was really going on.
No, you're absolutely right. Okay, so here's the other one. Repeating cycles of negative relationship patterns. That'd be trauma bond.
That's trauma bonded. And at the same time, you repeating that cycle, but you on that merry-go-round trying to find the right person that's going to meet your needs. But then you never really took the time to really get to know them either. Like you said, it goes back to trauma bonding. You find one thing that you connect with. You could talk about your childhood. You could talk about your past life, whatever it is. But if you find that one connection where y'all both can agree upon, boom, you think you in love.
Yeah.
You think, like you said, reunited.
Reunited and it feels so good.
But you know what I'm saying? For real though. I mean, it happens a lot.
Right.
Especially with celebrities.
Oh, it does.
I mean, you know, I ain't trying to put no celebrities on blast or anything, but you know. I'm just saying, like you see it all the time. Oh, they dumped this person, they put this person, and it's just like, man, it wasn't even a month.
Yeah.
They hadn't even been single a month.
Yeah.
They jumping. And you know, with celebrities, you always busy, so you really never have time to just sit down and think and reprocess your life and do all that. You just going from one person to the next.
You're absolutely right.
When people are trauma bonded, they like to stay in the honeymoon stage because the honeymoon stage will never let you down, because you know what? You never really spending that time to really be with each other under one roof and really see what a person really like. You only getting that half of a person.
Now you absolutely right.
And it's only when you're doing stuff, going on vacations, you know, meeting up for dinner and all this other stuff, you're never really getting to sit down and communicate and really getting to know each other.
You're absolutely right. And they do hop. You leave one relationship next. That's how you know. If you're a person working on yourself and working on yourself to heal your trauma, you know when folks are just hopping, and you see, you pick up on it, and it's just like, you know, of course, people are like, they're so in love. No, the fuck they ain't.
Nah,
they ain't. Like, you missing out. Okay, and the next one is having flashbacks and nightmares.
Ooh, having flashbacks and nightmares. That just go undisclosed of not being able to deal with who you are as a person and not dealing with your issues.
Oh, damn. That's deep.
Because you think about it, when you have nightmares, right? You have, like, you know, sweats. When you going through those things, especially at night, that's your body crying for help. Your sweat is your tears.
Oh, damn. That's deep.
Nah, it really is. I had to learn that because, you know what, I used to wake up drenched. Talking about having to change the bed sheets and everything because of having nightmares. Because, you know, I suffer from complex PTSD. You know, and I never really understood, like, I would talk about my traumas in therapy and the triggers. You go to sleep at night, everything's being replayed again. Waking up just drenched. My body, it was crying out for help. Damn. I never let my body heal. I never let myself really just say, you know what, you got to take care of you. Never did that because I thought taking care of me was taking care of everybody else, trying to be that fixer.
Damn. Okay. Yeah.
People have to look at it like that. It goes really deep. That's
definitely deep. Here's another one. I hear this all the time, and people say it all the time. Denial that your trauma you experienced didn't have an impact on you.
Yeah, that'd be those individuals where they just think, like, you know, they get up and they do the motivational speech and everything. And it sounds good. I'm not knocking nobody for it. But the thing of it is that sometimes it's misleading to individuals who haven't dealt with their trauma. And they think I can get through this. So they interpret it the wrong way by thinking like they be in denial. Like, well, if I just do this and if I hear this affirmation, or if I go on TikTok and hear this person motivational speech, then I'm getting somewhere. Nah, you got to stop, slow the roll. You actually got to put in the work.
You do. You got to put in the work.
You know what I'm saying? Some people live, you know, affirmations are really good. I have a book with affirmation, but I'm going to tell you when it really means more to you is when you actually putting in the work. You really understand the affirmation to the full effect, and it will carry you out through your day. You know what I'm saying? But if you're not putting in the work, you really in denial. You think, oh, I heard a good word today. It made me feel good. Did it really? Because it's only going to last for a moment. You see what I'm saying? So I think sometimes people get that concept confused, especially like, you know, when people are like famous, or when people are like I said, on TikTok, you get a lot of motivational speakers, and like I'll scroll through the comments and see what people say, and it's just like, man, a lot of people are in denial.
You know, the other thing I pick up too, the ones that always helping people,
right?
Those are the ones I hear from the most, because they don't have to think about themselves. They're like, well, why would I want to deal with myself when I can just help people?
Denial. You know what I'm saying? Like, one thing, you know, we tell people about this podcast, like, we talk about our own experiences. We know we're not perfect. You know what I'm saying? We go through our own struggles every day. But it's like, it's these conversations right here that people are scared to have. It's like, we got to have them. Because there's a lot of us out there that's hurting every single day where we feel like we don't have anybody to talk to.
No, you're absolutely correct.
And everybody got to have at least that one person that they can be open and honest with, that they trust, where they can have these type of conversations and sit down and be like, you know what? Hell, I know I'm fucked up, but it's okay though. Because now we can sit there and talk about it. And you got to have friends in your life that's going to be real with you too.
Yeah, definitely.
If you have people in your life that's not going to tell you about yourself or they sugarcoat shit, you know what? I'm not saying they're a bad person, but that means that they're uncomfortable to have that conversation with you too. Because one, they either got their own shit going on that they don't talk about. Two, they don't want to be that person to try to make you feel bad. You know what I'm saying? But in all, you need people in your life that you can tell each other like, hey, something ain't right with you today, dog. Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you kind of off today. That's who you need in your life. Like, real talk.
No, you're absolutely right. And the other one is irritability to regulate your emotions or emotional instability. Yes. Because you're always irritable. Yeah. So, yeah, no, like.
When you get triggered and
I have seen people flash like about the smallest thing, and it may not necessarily have to do with that thing, but something in there triggered that response.
No, it is.
And then the next one is try to not think about things.
Oh, that is the worst thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when you get into that moment where you try not to think about things and you get so good at not thinking about things, you don't care about nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You literally shut down and you walk around with a shield on.
Mm. Okay.
That's not good. I mean, sometimes you start as how like when you see kids and they don't want to talk to you or they stubborn or you be like, oh, that kid's a little brat or they spoil.
Mm-hmm.
No, sometimes you got to will it back in and really think like what's really going on with this kid.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
Then you have to look at the parents, you know? So like it's a whole dynamic of different situations on sometimes why kids act the way they act. But I mean like, just like, okay, here's a prime example.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I feel really bad for school teachers. I do. The school year starting up and everything. The stuff that school teachers have to go on, they have to do their job. They're underpaid. And then they have to deal with like different personalities in a room for like 50 minutes. For like almost, 4 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And you dealing with kids who coming from different household, different situations. And they supposed to be the one to be the leader in the classroom, but they being disrespected. They being targeted.
Absolutely.
And, teachers don't have no support. They being underpaid.
Overworked.
Overworked. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's really hard. And the thing of it is that teachers got to have more support.
Mm-hmm. They got trauma too.
Well, hell, don't nobody, like you said, they have trauma too. Don't nobody know what's going on in their household, what they got going on. And then they got to come and deal with somebody else's kids.
Yeah, you don't know what that kid may do. He may pop off, want to shoot or hit a teacher. There's been a lot of, and people like, well, it'll never happen to me. It don't have to happen to you. By you watching another teacher go through it creates trauma for you.
Right.
Because you are in that field.
I'm telling you, I give it up to the school teachers because I can never do it. I really could never do it, honestly, because I mean, that is a hard job. Back in the day, being a teacher, not saying that it was easy back in the day, but kids were more disciplined. Mm-hmm. In our era, kids were more disciplined. You know what I'm saying? Our parents had us in check. We were scared to get out of line. But nowadays, kids have this, what they call freedom of speech, and they need a voice and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. Not saying that kids don't need to have a voice. That's not what I'm saying. But at the same time, some parents need to be held accountable for how their kids act. Because some kids know, like, hey, I can act out of pocket. And no matter if I'm in the wrong, my parents going to have my back. Mm-hmm. Because the parents come up there saying, can't nobody say nothing to my child. We need to get to the root of the cause.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And that happens a lot. And it get, like you said, swept under the rug.
Mm-hmm. Parents just don't want to hold their kid accountable. But then when their kid lash out at them, then they want,
play the victim.
Nah. Don't play the victim now. Keep that same energy. Let's go.
So I mean, that's something to think about too. So, with the upcoming school year, even with kids, coming back to school, I think about those kids, the ones who don't have friends, the ones that are being bullied or whatever. Everybody got to start being kind to each other. Real talk, and some school systems in other states need to have a better policy when it comes to bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Start holding parents and kids accountable.
Definitely.
Because one thing, I really don't want to see go up this year is the suicide rate among the youth, and the young adult. Because, I mean, that was number one cause because of bullying.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff wasn't being done. And it's sad.
And that's trauma. Bullying is trauma.
It is.
And then when you really devalue what that child or that young adult go through, then they feel helplessness. You know what I'm saying? They're like, well, nobody believes me. So what are you going to do?
No, you're right. You absolutely right.
So I think our leaders and our parents, we need to do better.
We need to do better for real. Like I was a youth coach this year and I seen different types of, behavior, from my kids. And I'm looking at, the behavior of the kid and I'm looking at like family dynamic and everything like that. So, I took it upon myself and was like, look, I ain't your mama. But at the same time, when you leave off this field, you're going to leave with something.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to leave with dignity. You're going to leave with respect. You're going to leave off this field with something that, it's going to be healthy for you and for you to be able to better yourself because you guys are turning into teenagers. You're turning into, you're going to eventually be young men and young women at the end of the day, and sometimes, some parents need help and guidance with their kids,
And don't be embarrassed by it.
No.
They never give us a book to raise our kids and properly in the best way. We all got our different ways because we all got different cultures.
Right. So, I mean, the thing of it is too, though, is just that like, one of the sayings that came back, when we was growing up, it take a village to raise a child. And it's true. Because sometimes, as parents, you may not be able to give your child everything they may need. And sometimes kids may see like mentors and other people from a different perspective, a different way of light to be able to gain that knowledge. Because you know what I'm saying? We all was kids once. Yeah. We didn't listen to our parents on everything they said. Mm-hmm. Our parents could tell us to do something and say something and tell us how to act. And we kind of ignore it because we always hear it from our parents. But somebody else can come and say the same thing, but it click. So like I say, it do take a village to raise a child.
Yeah, no, you absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because as long as that child have multiple people they can go to and get that understanding and they respect, hey, and everybody communicating, I don't see anything wrong with it.
I don't either.
Our kids are our future.
You're right about that. And then our last one is you have refused to get help or treatment for your trauma.
That's a part because people are scared.
What do you mean by scared? Elaborate.
What I mean is that some people don't want to get help for their trauma because they don't want to go back down that pathway. Because in order to deal with your trauma, you got to relive your past. Some people think if I don't talk about it and I just ignore it, it's going to go away. But no, you're only in denial. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's just like, in order for you to be able to grow, you have to cut some of the limbs around it to make yourself a little bit lighter so you can reach higher levels, or do you want to just stay grounded?
Yeah.
You can't stay grounded and want to get to higher levels and put the blame on everybody and complain all the time. At some point, you got to cut the root of the cause and expand yourself. That's how you got to look at it.
Right.
So with that being said.
With that being said, we want to thank everybody from listening to us and enjoying. Please go onto our Facebook, our Instagram. Tell us, what you would like to hear, what you'd like to talk about. It's 293co, right, on Instagram, our Instagram.
Yeah, it's on Instagram is you can go to 293co clothing. Hit us up on there. And then also Poetic 293.
Yes. And just tell us what you want to hear or give us feedback. We will enjoy your feedback. So the feedback is a must. So go on there and give us feedback. But that being said, I'm just going to give you like 7 stages of trauma bonding. Like the first stage is idolization stage. And we'll also put this up on the 293 Code clothing line so you can kind of read the details of what that means. The next one is devaluation stage. And the third one is discard stage. Fourth one is hoovering. We know what that is. Trauma. And then the fifth one is trauma stage. And then the sixth one is recognition stage. And then the last one is recovery. So we'll put that up definitely on the page so you can look at that. But tell us, what's your trauma? Or you don't even have to tell us. Sit back. Ask yourself, what's my trauma? What triggers me? What takes me in a state of fight, flight, or freeze mode? I think I said that right.
I think you said it right.
But that's something to think about. Have conversation. And remember, have people in your corner that you can have uncomfortable conversations with. And that's going to be honest with you. Those are the people that you want in your corner. And that being said, I want to thank everyone. See you next time.
Peace.